Hi everyone. So what I recently shared with my classes is this webpage by Free Code Camp. And I love Free Code Camp because it just has so many resources for people learning to program, and it doesn't cost a thing. One of the pages was an article by Jessica Wilkins, who shared 40 easy projects to try for beginners learning JavaScript. One of the ones that caught my eye that I thought was fun was this article. Let's do a search. Rock, paper, scissors. And so I shared an image of my students of just what the screen looked like. So the tutorial on YouTube is by a guy called Tenzin, and I haven't watched the whole thing, but if I just open it,
so
what I basically did with my students was just shared that screenshot there and said, I'd like you to produce something like that. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. So what we've gone through so far is we've gone through basic how to create functions and variables and if statements, and so this is just a good little project where we get to put it all together. So I'm sure that Tenzin's video is excellent, to be honest. I have sort of skimmed through it, but it's an hour and a half, and actually this is the third time I'm recording this because I can just taking all the steps seems to take quite long, and it has taken me about 30 minutes. So the third time, let's see if this if I can do it a bit shorter. So this is my version of that project. Okay, so using REPL, I've just quickly knocked up a little example. So very similar to his one. I tried to copy his design. It's basically just some kind of a score on the top showing your score and the CPU score, and as you choose either rock, paper or scissors, then it should give us some kind of a result. So at this point it says draw. Take your pick again. So the CPU also chose the rock, so the score is still the same. If I choose rock again, even though this is not working. Oh, there we are. That was coincidental. So now when I chose paper, it says that the CPU chose rock, so obviously paper covers rock, and then my score goes up to 1. So then, let's get a winner. There we are. So now the CPU is 1, just gives me a choice to start again, and then it resets the scores. So we want to recreate that. I'm going to try skim through it as soon as possible. Bear with me. I don't want to go too fast because at the same time we're still learning some of these concepts. So let's open up. Right, so I've got a blank CodePen document. I'm just going to rename this one. Let's just call it rock, paper and scissors. Cool. Okay, and let's start with the interface at the front, so the HTML. So the content that needs to go on is here. I have a score, and then I've got an outline for that score as well. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say, obviously in CodePen you don't have to type in sort of HTML and then body, etc. It just assumes that bit's done for you already, so you just have to start with whatever would go in between the body tags. So I'm going to start with a div, okay, and I'm going to call this one, let's give it a class, because we're going to decorate that later using this class. So I'm going to say class, and let's call this one scoreboard. Inside that, then I'm going to have a paragraph tag, and this paragraph I'm gonna inside it, let's put down, what was first? Okay, so it says you, and then an arrow, and the scores. So here I'm going to say you, and then I could do that, but that doesn't look very nice, and you can see it's appearing here as we go. If you were to hit the Windows button and the full stop button at the same time, you get a little emoji pop-up. Helps you choose emojis, right? So let's find the arrow emoji. Arrow. Is it going to be there? In fact, hold on, just type in arrow. There we are. So I need that one, and I also want that one. All right, cool. So so let's put a 0 there, and then that, and another 0, and then that, and then let's say CPU. Now later on I'm going to come and sort of separate some of these because these scores need to be able to be updatable. So we'll come back to that in a second, or in a bit, should I say. And let's give this one a class as well, or an ID. Yeah, no, let's give it a class. So let's call this one user scores. User scores, all right. And we are going to give this one an ID as well. Let's also give it an ID of. Actually, no, we're not going to give it an ID. It just needs a class. So that's the first part. After that, I just have this line here that says take your pick. So let's create another div underneath that. So let's create another div, and in between there we just want, for now, just some text to say something like take your, or should I say make your choice, not take your, or make your move, make your, let's take your pick will do. And again, we'll come back to that, but you see this div needs to be actually no, I'll leave that for now. Okay, so basically we're just fleshing it out, and we're going to style it out in just a bit as well. Underneath that, then I want a row of buttons, so I'm going to introduce another div here, and this is going to be my row of buttons. So let's say we want 3 buttons in there, and if I click Windows and full stop, and I think on Mac that's going to be Control and full stop, but I'm not sure about Macs. So let's do that, and let's search for rock. Actually, no, it won't be rock, it'll be fist. That would do, fist. In fact, let's find the others as well. So the other thing would be palm. Oh no, hold on. Hand. And there we are. And is there a scissor icon? Should we use that? Is that the way it is? I think that would be my scissor icon. Okay, good. And obviously then what I'm going to do is just, it's probably not the best way to do this, copy paste a few times. So it should be rock, so rock, and then paper, and then scissors. There we are. So there's our 3 buttons. Cool. And underneath that I just want some comment here. So let's do another p tag, and in this line this is going to be like a response. So for example, when I click on a choice, it's going to tell me what the CPU chose. So I'm not completely, I'm not completely relying on the CPU to, or the program to be honest. It's going to be honest, but let's so basically here, if I just put an X, you'll see that this is where that response is going to appear, but I don't want that there, so I'm going to get rid of that. All right, cool. So so the next thing is, should I leave styling to last, or should I do styling first? I like to style things because I want things to appear like I don't know, if it looks nice, I don't know, it just gives me an incentive to keep working. So okay, so let's start with style. So if we go CSS, and the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna say that I chose a font. If you've never done this before, so if you go to Google Fonts or fonts.google.com, I've chosen this font, and as you know, every computer won't have every single font installed, and so the idea of web fonts are fonts that are commonly found on most computers. So they're like Arial, Times New Roman, and a few other ones. So if you want something a bit nicer, we can use something called Google Fonts, which is basically what we something known as a CDN, or Content Delivery Network Library. No, CDN, Content Delivery Network, I believe. I could be wrong on that, on the acronyms. So basically they host the font and we import the font, and every time your page is loaded, as the page is being downloaded to a user's computer, it's also downloading the font script from Google at the same time as your page is being downloaded from your service. So this is the one I've chosen, and the installation is quite easy. If I could say select this style and then go to here, it just shows me how I can import it, and you would use this in the head of your HTML document, but I'm going to use this method, which I can use directly in the CSS style sheet. So if I go to there, and in CSS, that's imported the font, but now we have to apply the font. Okay, so if you remember, I gave this div here a class name. So in fact what I'll do is I'll do one for user scores. So let's say user scores. Okay, and this isn't going to work. I'll tell you why in a second. And it actually tells us here how to import it. So if we go to there, it tells us font family, cursive, and Fredoka 1. So if you can't load it, then by default it's a cursive font. So if I just dump that in there, okay, it should work, but what I've forgotten is this. So if I want to in CSS just change attributes of a tag, like for example the body tags, right, or h1 or paragraph or whatever, then I will just, this is how I would write it. But because this is a class, you mustn't forget that a class has to have the full stop in front of it. So now if I do that, you'll see that the font is now updated because I put that full stop there, which is indicating to the style sheet that this is the style for this particular class. So now for the body, actually, might as well do this. So let's do background color, spelled American spelling, and I just want it to be dark gray. There we are. Okay, cool. So that's my background done as well. And then the other thing I want is I want this text to be aligned to the center. Again, this is going to be center is American spelling. There we are, and it's too small, so let's make it nice and big. Let's say font dash size. Font dash size can be nice and big, like 36 or something. There we are. Cool. So we're missing a few things here. At this point, that's looking alright, but we haven't got the outline. So we're gonna do the outline in just a moment. In fact, to do that, I'm gonna head over to W3 Schools, and this is something I was looking at earlier for a button. But so if we just scan along on the CSS, this is where I basically reference most things. So here, there's lots of ideas of how we can do our outline. Let's try that one, and I think my one was a dashed one. Yep, cool. Okay, cool. So I'll go for that outline style dashed, but that isn't thick enough. Outline width, outline shorthand. Okay, that's better. Okay, right. Okay, so using this method, I can see that I can put quite a few bits on one line. So this. Where the other examples had the outline and then it had the color and whether it was dashed or not on different lines, the shorthand method seems to do it all on one line. So I'm going to borrow that because it's kind of got what I want, and I'm going to change the solid to dashed. So if I go to there again, and so where was we? Oh, I need to create one. So this has to be dot scoreboard. There we are. And for our scoreboard, basically we're going to have an outline, and we want that to be white, and we want it to be dashed like that, and 5 pixels is good, nice and thick. However, this is really wide, it's stretched out to the whole screen, right? So I want that to be contained a bit more. So if I look at that example, it's a bit more contained. So let's add a width. Oops, my bad. Oops. So let's add a width. What's that, 400? Okay, that's not bad. Okay, 400, but let's also add a margin. So yeah, okay, so if I do this, if I say margin and then we say 0 auto, I think what that should do is it should align it from the margin, the edge of the page. If I say auto, it kind of aligns it dead center. So that will do for that. Oh, I thought, because now I can see that my user, my score text isn't aligned center. Why is that? What have I done wrong? Anyway, Let's see. I'm so dumb. Okay, so the reason this didn't work, the reason why that's not centered is because I'm silly enough to forget that I haven't applied my class to that text there. So really, I just want it to have that as well. So I want it to be same font, it needs to be centered, and I don't mind it being nice and big as well. So easiest way to do that is to just say, if we were to go into there and add the same class equals, what was that? It was user scores. So that should just apply the same style to that as well, and that's fine. I think that's good. So next, it would look nicer if the buttons were centered. So let us, if we go to there, let's create a class for here. Class equals, let's call it buttons row, and then underneath in the CSS, we're going to add this class here, buttons row. And I think all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say text align, because this should work for the buttons as well. Text align and center. Good. Alright, cool. So the buttons are now aligned to the center as well. So our next step is to style those buttons. And at the moment they just look like bog standard buttons, yeah? So let's make them, if you look over here, I've got big nice round ones, yeah? So as I click on it as well, there's a slight animation. So let's work on that. So to do that, if we now go to W3 Schools again, good reference guide, and let's Google, because I can't find it, let's Google buttons. What? Oh, there we are. Okay, so there's buttons, and as I said, our one looks like this one at the moment, that default button, and I want it to look a bit nicer, and I want round buttons. So here it gives me an example of how I can make a completely round button, and it's basically telling me that the border radius is 50%. So let's see where it says try yourself. Let's open that up, and what I can see going on here is, first of all, there's a class for the button. So this is the same for every button, and it's basically just saying that every button is green, doesn't have a border, the font is going to be white, etc, etc. Okay, and then what it has is got a separate class. So for example, for each one, can you see the shape is slightly different because they've got different curves on the edges. The radius is different for the curves. So what they're doing is they've created 5 different classes. This class here then is for the round one, and because I'm just going to create one, I think I can create one class and just take this extra line and dump it in here as well. So it look so because I can see here where they've done the 5 buttons in the HTML section of theirs, they've just applied these extra classes inside the class area. So I'm going to copy that. Let's copy that, and let's stick that. Let's create a new class. I'm just going to call it BTN, and I haven't put the full stop down again. So if I do that and then just dump those in there, so now we need to go to each one, and we're going to say class equals BTN, and then let's copy that for each one. Boom, and stick that there, and stick that there as well. And I can see now what I've got is I've got 3 buttons that are square and green. That's cool. I don't want that green. I want a dark sea green. That's what I chose. Cool, a bit more pastel-y, which I like. And then I want it to be completely round. So under here where it says cursor, and basically the cursor pointer basically means that when I put my mouse over it, it becomes a pointer. So it indicates that it's something that's clickable. So what was I going to do? It was going to be, let's just borrow that border radius 50%. Let's take that and let's dump that in. So then they should be round, but they're not as big as I would like, because I think my examples were bigger. So to change that, first of all, where it says color is white, border, I do want a border. I want it to be thick like the outline I had earlier, so it's going to be 5 pixels, and I want it to be solid and white, so it kind of as a conforming style. Padding is fine. Text decoration none. I could get rid of some of this stuff. Margin. Okay, maybe what I should do here is font size. If I make that bigger, if I make it like size 40, will it make my icons bigger? Yeah, that's fine. So that's done it. That's made the icons as big as I want them. Okay, so next thing is, as I click on them, I'm not seeing the animation that I had done in my previous one. So to do that again, let's go back to W3 scores, and if we go to buttons further down, there's an example of, you know, different ways you can animate them. Like for example, hover, and you know, that sort of click down, the fades and ripples and stuff. I'm gonna go for that, but I'm not gonna have that shadow. So again, I'm just gonna take the example from there, and what's going on here is, on that BTN or that button class, they've got this active. So basically, active means once it's been selected, they're saying that change the background color slightly, or yeah, and then shadow changes. Does it get darker? Yes, it does. Okay, but really all I want is that. So I'm gonna copy all of that anyway. What this here says is translate Y by 4 pixels. So across a screen, so if we go from left to right, that's what we call the x-axis. So if it was to move left to right, then you'd use translate X, but translate Y means sort of along the top to bottom, and it's saying change it by 4 pixels. So it gives it an appearance of animation just by moving it down 4 pixels. So I'm going to borrow that. So if I go back to mine, and then I do this, so, and then mine one wasn't called button, it was called BTN. So my BTN active, so what happens when it's been clicked or activated, I'm going to get rid of background colors, and I'm just going to keep that says translate Y 4 pixels. So if I do that now, you can see that it just gives the appearance that they've been clicked on, which is fine. That's kind of all I wanted. So I think that's the majority of the style, and I think anything I've missed out we can add a bit later. I think that's about right. What am I left here? Okay, my response could have a style as well. Okay, so let's give that a name. Let's call that another class. So we're going to say, let's just call it CPU response. This is a long name. Now I'm thinking CPU response text. That's long, but let's borrow that. Okay, and really I don't mind this text being small. So if we do that, oops, dot, and then open the brackets, I'm going to want the same font, so I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to borrow that. In fact, let's borrow all of it, because the only difference is going to be that I don't want it to be so big. This can be a nice small font like 14. So obviously at the moment we can't see anything, but if we just put something there like hey, there we are. Okay, that's fine. So I think that's all the styling that I wanted to apply. Good. So basically I think the HTML section is kind of done. That will need a small tidy up in a second. I think the styling is done, so that just leaves us with now getting on with the JavaScript. So let's start off by saying we need a couple of variables. So we're going to need a variable for player to keep the player score, that's U, and then a variable for CPU score. Okay, and then okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to create a function so that every time you click on a button, it's going to create a random choice for the CPU, right? So I've done a quick search, and I've just basically just searched for how to create a random selection from a list in JavaScript, and just come across this example, and I may link that down below, and so that I don't forget that. In fact, if I do that, and if I just do that, just so that I know I'm gonna have to link that later, and what I'll do is I'll move that way down there so it doesn't obstruct what you're seeing. Okay, so next thing then is, let's borrow some of that. So I'm going to create my variable for the array. Let's borrow that. In fact, let's borrow the whole thing for a second. Okay, let's just dump that there. I'm going to butcher this a little bit. So forget that for a second. I'll come back to this. So I'm not naturally a JavaScript programmer. So I learn as I go along, or I look things up when I need it. So I'm going to create a function to say CPU random choice. That's a bit long as well. Let's use camel casing. So there's that. So when this function is called, we want it to look up an array. Let's cut that and let's stick that there. And this array, let's just call it array for short. And let's just say rock, paper, and scissors. And let's get rid of the rest. Cool. So when that is called, we want it to make a random selection for us. So let's say CPU choice. CPU choice, that's got to be a variable like that. So CPU choice equals, let's borrow that. It's going to be, let's borrow that. And let's stick that there. And let's change that song. Let me make that a bit wider so you can see it a bit better. Alright, so obviously that isn't called song anymore. My examples are array. So there's my choice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say console.log, which basically outputs something to a console. And I'm going to say output that. So basically, let's see if that works. Now I can get rid of that. I believe I don't need that anymore. And let's call the function. So if I say CPU random choice and I do that, it should output to the console. Let's clear that. Song is not defined. Okay, so I need to change that. Where have I got song? Okay, right. That's got to be array. So where that is that. So what we're saying is floor math random. So basically choose a random number. And the way it works in JavaScript is it chooses the number between 0 and 1. And if we click on floor, then it kind of makes it an integer, floors it, and then it chooses a random number from the length. So it's going to be a number between 1 and 3. And rather than it being like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, it's now, because we've used the floor function, it's going to be 1, 2, or 3. And it's basically saying from the array, pick a random number 1, 2, or 3. Well, sorry, actually 0, 1, 2, and then it should say either rock, paper, scissors, and it seems to be working. So if we refresh and run that again, let's save just in case. And now that it's reloaded, it should run again, and it says in paper. Okay, good. So I think it works. So it should work. Yeah, it should be fine. Yeah. Okay, so let's get rid of that. I don't need that anymore because I know it's working, I hope. And instead of saying console, in fact no, what I shouldn't have done was, instead of doing that, I should have done return. Oops. Okay, so what's going to happen is, let's make that wide again. So what will happen is, let's get rid of that, it's annoying me. When the function is run, it's going to return the choice the CPU made, and we're going to use that later on. So I don't need that right now. Let's comment that out. I'm going to borrow that in a second. So the next thing I'm going to write is, I need to write another function that we're going to use on our buttons to make a choice. So this is where the player, let's write function. This is where the player is going to choose rock, paper, or scissors, and then it's going to make a decision of who won, either the player or the CPU. So I'm just going to say, let's call it play, and we're going to do that. And then here we're going to need a response. we'll come back to that in a second. CPU result. So let's first of all start with the variable CPU result is equal to that. So now I'm going to borrow that. Let's take that and let's stick that there. So every time the play button is pushed, what we're going to do is we're going to call that function where the CPU has a random choice. So it's going to collect, it's going to run that function, it's going to return a result, and that return result will be saved here as CPU result. Or really, maybe I should have said CPU choice. It doesn't matter. Next. Okay, good. Next then. Yeah, you know what, I'm going to change that. Let's go with that CPU choice. Good. Actually, you know where I'm going to put CPU choice? I'm going to say CPU result is actually going to be, let's do that. What we're going to do is we are going to output what the CPU chose at the bottom over here. So if you remember where we have a p tag at the bottom, we're going to put that there. But anyway, let's start with getting the player to choose. So we're going to say if, in fact I can't write this yet, let's apply some logic. So I could have 3 separate functions that do exactly the same thing. So what I mean by that is here on our buttons we need to apply these functions so that when each one is clicked it tells the computer that the player chose rock, paper or scissors, etc. So what I'm going to say is on click we're going to say on click we're going to run the function play, and we're going to give an argument, in this case of rock, right? So that will make more sense in a second. Look, over here where we say play, we need to give the play function a parameter. Let's just say player choice. You know what, that's long. I'm being too long-winded with these variable names. So the player makes a choice, and basically this is that choice, that the parameter that's passed through, this is what we're going to call it in the function. So let's copy that a few times. So there, on click, so every time it's clicked they're going to make a separate choice. So the first one was rock, then it's paper, and the next one is scissors. Cool. So every time the button is pushed, and we'll test that as well in a second actually. So if I was to say here, let's do console.log, and let's just print out choice. So now when a button is pushed on the console, let's open the console back up, let's clear that. When I click on a button, if it's rock, then what should happen is it will run that function rock, which means it plays that function, it makes a random CPU choice, and then it will output the choice that I made, which was rock at first. So if I click on that, I see rock. If I click on that, I see paper, and then scissors. So I know that's working. Let's do this as well. So let's say player. Oh, and I should do this. I should do that player plus that, and then let's also add plus CPU, just so we can see, did the CPU, does it work? Are we getting that choice coming through each time? So we're going to say CPU choice, like that. So let's put a semicolon there, and let's clear that. So now let's do that. Oh, play is not defined. What do you mean? It worked a second ago. Oh, is it because of that? Hold on. Yes, it was that. So it says the player chose rock and the CPU chose scissors, paper, blah blah blah. Do you know what I haven't seen though? I'm wondering. I haven't seen the. Oh yeah, I was just checking because I haven't seen the CPU choose rock yet, and I wanted to just make sure that worked. Okay, so that's working. So again, I can get rid of that because I know that player input is working, and then selecting a CPU choice is working as well. So that means we can go ahead and write our if statement. So now we're going to say if choice, so this is the player's choice, is equal to, if it's equal to rock, okay, and if the CPU choice is equal to rock, it's got to be scissors, right? Scissors. Then what we can do is we can say, if we go back to let's move it out of the way. If we go back to the top, if you remember, we have our player and CPU scores. So what we're going to say is player plus equals 1. So we're going to increase the player score by 1, and then we'll have some kind of a text to say output. Yeah, so we're going to have an output text. So let's create that here. Let's call that text. And here, if I say text is going to be equal to, what should we say? You scored. You scored. Take your next pick. Alright, cool. So that lets us know that we won that round. And then what we want to do is we want to do a bunch of else ifs or elifs. Alright, so we're going to say else if, and I'm literally, you know what, I'm going to copy the same thing because no one's got time to sit there and write that out again. Let's borrow up to there. Boom. And so this one is going to be if the player chose, what's that, paper in it? Paper. And if the player chooses paper to win, the CPU would have to have rock. And then if we do that one more time, so if the last one, if the player chose scissors, and for the CPU to lose, it would have to be paper. Cool. And then one last one, right? But this one isn't for that, so we're going to say if the CPU is equal to, sorry, if the choice is equal to the CPU's choice, alright, we're going to say no one gets a score, and we're going to say draw, take your next pick. So in other words, you both pick the same thing, okay? And then for everything else, I guess that would mean that the CPU made the correct choice, right? So if that's the case, then what we're going to say is, we're going to say text, and we're going to say something like CPU scored, take your next pick. Yeah, because I think with all other scenarios then, the CPU would have won, and I've just realized I've missed all my semicolons here. I think that's okay. So that's our if statement. Okay, at the end of each of our if statements, we want to output some text. Okay, so we want that text to come out, and we want that text to appear. Oh, hold on, I forgot one other thing. So if the CPU wins, then we should say CPU plus equals 1. So the CPU score goes up, and then we want the text to be output. So we're going to say document dot get element by ID, and the ID for the text, if we go back to the top, so what we want to see replaced is this bit here, class user scores. So let's give us an ID as well. So we're going to say ID equals round text or something like that. So text for that particular round, that will do. And if I go back to there, and we just put that in there, and dot HTML equals text. So the text that we've got for each if statement outcome should appear at the end of each function call. And then we also want to say what choice the CPU made. All right, so if we go back to the top here, one moment, gonna sneeze. Right, big sneeze, you missed that one. All right, probably for the best. So let's add an ID here as well, because here I just want the CPU's choice to come out. What should I call this? Let's give it an ID of CPU, I don't know, chose or something stupid like that. Now let's copy that. Let's go back to here, and we want to say document. You know what? Yeah, dot. I should have copy this element by ID, whoops, and okay, dot inner HTML equals, and I'm just going to say CPU chose, and then let's do plus, and then CPU no capitals, CPU choice. So it should give us an output at the bottom around here somewhere. Let's close that, that's annoying. Every time you type something, obviously that code is not complete and it keeps refreshing and it keeps sending me my errors. I don't want to see my errors right now. I think, are we done? Do I have an error still? What's my error? An unexpected token. Oh yeah. What's that then? Let's have a look. So let me count my brackets. So I've got my opening bracket for the function. Okay, cool. So the if statement, closing bracket, opening bracket. Okay, that's it. No, it's not. That's fine. That's meant to be there. Else if, open bracket, close bracket. Oh, okay. Right. Gotcha. Right. Here's my mistakes. Okay, so where I've got else if there, I haven't wrote else if here. So it's looking for that. And then the same thing here as well. So else if, and then that one's an else. I think that's all done. There should be no other errors. So that should be the closing bracket for all the if statements there. And then the last bracket there should be the one for the function. So I think we're good. Okay. Have I missed anything out? Yes, I have. I have missed something out. Okay, so also at the end of each one of these, let's borrow that for a second. And let's stick that there, and let's do that one more time. And this is going to be, let's say, user score, and this one is going to be CPU score. I don't have that anywhere else, do I? I don't think I've got any other IDs. So that is going to be player. Okay, and that one is going to be CPU. I don't know if that will work unless I've imported them here as well, but let's give it a go. So basically this is so that these scores here change. Okay, to do that, I haven't mentioned this as well, so where I've got that there, I need to include span tags. Okay, so I'm going to say let's click span. So span is kind of like another tag you can use, like paragraph or etc., but it can be used in between another one. So what did I say that was? I said that was, did I say user score? User score. Yeah, user score and CPU score. Let's copy that one. Good. User score, and then let's put that there. Span ID equals. Done it again. Good. So I can take that 0 now, and that 0 can go in there, boom, and then I can take that 0, and that 0 can go in there. So each time, before we touch anything, it's always going to start with those zeros in between the tags, but then when we start clicking, it should start updating. So every time that function is called, then another thing that the document's going to be updated with is the player score and the CPU score. So if I do that, hey, there we are. You scored. Take your next pick. It's all good. Oh, okay, right. I can see what's going on here. Can you see my scores? It's not telling me if I want to reset. So let's do that. So then we're going to say, let us create one more function to reset things, right? So let's create another function here, and I'm just going to call this one reset. Oh no, hold on. Function, let's call this function reset. So when this is called, oh, let's spell function. There we are. So when this is called, we're going to say player equals 0, and then CPU equals 0. I think that's fine. So the way that's going to happen is, let's just run another if statement here. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to say if player is equal to free. If player equals free, yeah, alright, cool. Shall I do that? Shall I do that? Yeah, alright. So if player equals free, I was just wondering if I should put an or here, but I don't, because I want different outcomes if the player wins or if the CPU wins. So we're going to say text. Yeah, let's change text equals text equals you win, and oops, what am I doing? You win, and then we want a question to be asked. Yeah, like play again. No, actually, let's make that a button. We're going to come to that in a second. So you win. Else if whoops. Else if CPU is equal to free. If CPU is equal to free, then what we're going to say is text equals CPU wins. Okay, and then again we want a button that says play again. So at this point I'm just going to take that, and what will happen is this will all happen in a split second. So at first it will say actually that, you know, draw, take your next pick, but once this line of code has been run, it's probably going to happen too fast for us to see it say take your next pick, and it will probably just say you win. So that's probably what we're going to see. And then what we'll have is a button next to it that says take your, what you call it again? Take your play again. Sorry, getting over COVID here. So let's try that. So let's get a winner. Okay, so I win. So I actually didn't notice it say take your pick, because I think it just happens within a split second. You don't see that. So let's throw a button in there, and there's a nice way to do this actually. So here, what we're gonna do is we're literally gonna throw a button in by actually literally coding it. In fact, let us just do this. Let's say button, and then button like that. Okay, and we're gonna say play again, and we're gonna say on click equals. Now here, when I'm writing a string, I've used double quotes, so I'm going to use single quotes here to say on click. Oops, not that one. So on click, my bad, there. Yeah, on click, run the function that says reset. And in fact, I've just realized here that says result and not reset. Good. I think that should work. We could give this class a style as well, but for now let's just see how it looks. So let's make a winner again. Save that. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So it worked. Okay, so it says you win, and then play again, and then oh, that didn't work. On click, reset. Why didn't that work? What have I missed there? On click equals reset. Oh, what have I done wrong there? So I've got my button. Oh no! Oh no! That should work. That should have worked. Start again, and then button. Is it because I haven't ended that? No, it should be fine. No semicolon, is that why? It does make sense. Oh, hold on. Yes. You win, play again. Save that. I don't think that's going to make a difference. So else if player wins, so it's going to say button on click. The button came up on click. Well, let's borrow that again. Whatever I've done, let's hold on. Let's borrow that, and let's stick that in there, and let's try that one more time. Let's put a semicolon there as well. Now, why hasn't that worked? Oh, I'm wondering, is it because the function reset, does it need to be above the function for play? I'm not sure I'm not sure JavaScript works in the same way as some of the other languages, but it might be that the order of things, maybe reset doesn't exist at the time play is called. Let's have a look. CPU 1. Oh, that didn't even work at all. So let's go again. So what have I got wrong here? Oh, it's because I've said if it equals 0. There we are. Alright, let's run that one more time. So there we are. Okay, CPU wins. Play again. Oh, okay, I think I know what it is. I think it's because the button, should we have a class? I think it's because it should have a class to signify that it's a button, that is something that's clickable. Whoops, that's got 3 single quotes. Oh, stupid. There we are. So I'm going to apply the same style as the other buttons, which is not what I wanted. Let's give it a go. Oh. Okay, so what I've done is I've looked at the example that I did before, and I'm going to change it slightly. So basically, I'm going to say that. Let's take that. Boom. Fine, let's get rid of that. Alright, and let's just stick that here. So if I do that, I think in the example I did previously, this is the difference. Alright, let's test it now. Oh. Okay. I've just realized I've made a rookie mistake, as always, and I can see my mistake now. It is working. It is working. Here's I'm going to show you why. So as I've done that, if I win, okay, if I click on play again, okay, the score hasn't changed at this point, but when you start playing again, you'll see that the score then starts resetting. Okay, so we'll do it again. Play again, yes, and then it resets. The reason why is because I'm an idiot. Let's borrow those 2 lines there, and they also need to go inside this function that says reset. So at the point that we click on the reset button, the scores are resetting, the variables in the background are resetting, but I wasn't updating the scores at the front on the HTML. So if I do that again, let's try it. So 1, 2, blah blah blah, there we go. It wins, and then now the scores are reset. And I don't really like the style of that. So as a last thing, I'm just going to, let's steal another button. It could be anything, you know, and maybe I'll just use, I don't want to bother with that. I want to keep it simple, to be fair. That will do. Let's just take that little one with the outline. Let's go there. Where's the outline one? Is that the one? I believe it's that one. We'll take that. Cool. And so we'll go back to there. And as a last thing, we're going to say, let's just make one more dot button. Oh, actually, do I need a? Yes, I do. Yep. And let's keep it uniform. So let's say dark sea green. Dark sea green. And so the next thing then is not there, is in here. to apply that where it says class, that's got to be button, and then this one here doesn't have that yet, so let's put that there as well. Okay, let's try it one more time, and I think everyone's happy. Boom, there we are, except it's not an outline. I'll live, that's not the end of the world. Okay, cool, so that's it. That's how we've done rock, paper, scissors. Unfortunately, it's lasted an hour, but I hope I've gone slow enough and walked you through the process so you can understand how it's done as well. So yeah, okay, let me know what you think.